Welcome, everybody. It's great to see everybody in here today. We're going to have a wonderful day. It's kind of loud. I'm trying not to break it here. All right, I'm going to introduce Sister Victory to you guys. So, Sister Ann Victory currently serves on the leadership team for the Sisters of Humility of Mary. She spent 32 years as a clinician, educator, and administrator in nursing, and served as Director of Staff Education and Vice President of Mission at Community Health Partners in Lorain, Ohio, now named Mercy Health. After serving on a prior leadership team from 2001 to 2009, she worked as Education Director for the Collaborative to End Human Trafficking in Cleveland, Ohio, until 2021 and remains a volunteer for that organization. She is also a board member of the U.S. Catholic Sisters Against Human Trafficking, a national network of Catholic sisters who are addressing the issue of human trafficking across the country. Sister Ann graduated from St. John College in Cleveland, Ohio, and with her RN and a bachelor's degree in nursing. She received a master's degree in nursing from Ohio State University in Columbus, Ohio. She has a postgraduate certificate from the Gestalt Institute of Cleveland, working with groups. She designs and has given presentations on various aspects of human trafficking to a wide variety of audiences, including junior high and high school students, university students, professionals in social services, healthcare, law enforcement, church groups, civic groups, and the general public. A major portion of her recent work has been with healthcare systems in Cleveland to implement human trafficking protocols into their services, and with colleges and universities to integrate the topic into their curriculum for helping professions. And we are very excited to have you this morning.
Thank you. Well, I'm really delighted to be with you this morning, and I'm going to not even use my slides yet, because I want to give you a prelude to the slides based on how did this come about? How did we get to be working in the Cleveland area on the issue of human trafficking from the perspective of health? That's my lens, and our collaborative is made up of a variety of professionals and survivors that have different lenses. So it becomes a group that brings their best to the table. So way back in about 8 years ago, we had a group called Housing and Services as part of our collaborative. And it was people from social service agencies, the justice end of things, so law enforcement and the courts. Healthcare providers were a big piece of that. And so at one of our meetings, one of the nurses, who happened to be a sexual assault nurse, said, you know, I know we're seeing people who have been trafficked, and I don't know if we're responding appropriately. And another one in the room, also a sexual assault nurse at another system, said, well, you know, I know we're seeing them, and this is what I've been trying. And so she posed that, and so the other nurses in the room said, I want to talk about this. Can we do something together? Because our goal was that everyone coming to a health facility in Cleveland should get similar treatment. We're not competing here. This is an area where patients deserve the best care we can give them in our region. So that was our goal, and we together worked out how are we going to make this happen, especially because the competitors are pretty fierce. The Cleveland Clinic, University Hospitals, Metro Health Medical Center, and the smaller system, St. Vincent Charity. So the four came together. We met to figure out what could we do, and our premise was, our hypothesis was, practitioners don't know this issue very well, and they don't know how to respond. So how do we find that out so that we can know that we're working off a correct premise? So we came up with a paper pencil little survey and distributed it to physicians, nurses, social workers, PAs, those working in emergency rooms in 8 of the facilities across the 4 systems. So we got a big response. We got 197 responses, and our hypothesis proved to be true. Practitioners, for the most part, did not know or understand human trafficking. They did not realize that they might be seeing clients who have been trafficked So they weren't confident that they could identify, or how would they respond? They didn't feel very confident in giving an appropriate response. But they told us they wanted to learn about it. So that was really encouraging. We were hoping for that. And they told us they wanted to learn through scholarly articles. We thought, well, yeah, right. In 2014, there weren't many of those. Now there are really a lot of them through heel trafficking and other sources, but at that time, there weren't many. They also wanted to learn by video presentations or seminars like that they could view on their own time, or they wanted in-person classes. So we were pretty encouraged that, yeah, we were on the right track and we could make a difference here. So because they wanted to learn by video, we thought, well, maybe we should make one. We had no clue how to do that or the money to do it, but we did get a grant to do it and a way to do it. So we filmed at all 4 entities. Now, you didn't ever hear me say that we went to the administrations of these big facilities or systems to get any permission. We thought, yeah, it's not going to happen. We'd wait 20 years to get the permission. So let's just do it and then let them know what we have. We have something to offer. So that's what we did. We filmed it all 4 so that they all felt a part of it, and they all endorsed it. And as part of the process, we came up with what we thought would be reasonable steps to follow if there is an encounter with a person who's being trafficked. So that became the basis of our approach. So knowing that they need the basics, we started with education around what this issue is, because you need that in order to move forward at all. So that's my prelude. I'm happy to answer questions as we get to the end of this. So all 4 systems participated. All 4 systems now have integrated protocols into their staff orientation and ongoing education. They'll do it a little differently, but the protocols are the same. And they've just tweaked it to fit their culture a bit. And we have an algorithm that they use to get them there. So that's the basis of it. So come on, move. So we start with the basics. What is this issue? And we take the definition out of the law. You've seen this before. It is recruitment, harboring, transportation, provision, or obtaining of a person for commercial sex or for labor or services. The methods being force, fraud, or coercion. So people have to know what we're dealing with before they can begin to address it. And I want to start with this. I want to ask you, what do you see here? How would you describe that red thing? What does it look like to you? There are no wrong answers because we all see something. So just shout it out. What do you see there?
A head with arms.
A head with arms, okay. What else could it be?
A flowing river.
A flowing river, all right. Other things that you see?
It's inclusive.
It's inclusive, okay. What else could it be? I've gotten things like, it's a red ribbon. It's letters. It's it's a LSO. It's a bicycle. It could be anything, right? Because it's what you see which counts. So I'll tell you what it really is. It is LSO, and that is the logo of the London Symphony Orchestra. Now, once you know that, you do see perhaps the conductor with arms raised. But unless you know it, you describe it other ways. And you're not wrong, but with human trafficking, what we see counts. And if we misidentify what we see, we could be missing someone who's in trouble. We could be missing an opportunity to intervene in a way that could be helpful to them. So as practitioners, what we see really does matter. And we know that from our basic assessment training, but it makes a difference with this crime as well. So as you well know, this is a huge, huge global issue. These numbers come from the International Labor Office as of 2021. And they are estimates, because nobody knows how to count this well, as we heard yesterday. So you'll see different numbers depending on who's doing the estimates, but the International Labor Office has estimated that about 50 million people are trapped in human trafficking of some sort across the world. They also estimate, and it's probably a low estimate, that this is about a $150 billion a year global enterprise. And that's probably low too, because we don't know how to count it. They estimate that 99 billion of that comes from the sex trade, and the other 51 billion from some sort of labor or services. It's supposed to be second only to drug trafficking, and up to this point it's been very low risk and extremely high profit. It's all about the money, and that's the harm that comes to people, because it's all about money. So commercial sex, any sort of sexual abuse, as we know, is terrible. What makes this commercial is the exchange of something of value for sex. Now, that can be money, but it could be a place to stay. It could be my next meal, a bus ticket to get somewhere else, a new cell phone, anything of value exchanging hands. And if the person engaged in this act is under the age of 18, that child is a victim of a crime. No need to prove force, fraud, or coercion. I think you've heard that before. These victims are found in lots and lots of places. The common ones would be strip clubs or brothels or massage parlors or escort services or private homes. And our survivor friends say every zip code. It's everywhere. It's not just in certain parts of town or certain sorts of people. Labor trafficking, those same methods, force, fraud, and coercion to recruit or harbor or transport or obtain or so-called employ a person for some sort of work they're not choosing to do. They're being forced into it. It may be called involuntary servitude. It might be called peonage, which is really an old term for debt bondage, paying off a debt that maybe isn't even theirs, and they're having to work it off, and they never earn enough to work it off. So the slavery piece becomes apparent there. These victims, too, found in lots and lots of work situations. Maybe they're a nanny in a home or a maid in a hotel. Maybe they're working in agriculture or in a factory or in a janitorial job or at construction sites or in restaurants or nail salons. The list goes on and on and on, where people might be trapped in labor trafficking. And sometimes the two get intertwined, both sex and labor trafficking. So trafficking is really exploitation. That's the crime. It's not the movement at all. You don't have to be moved to be trafficked. And that's one of the myths that seems to be out there. If you talk to Teresa, one of our survivors, as you know, she was living at home. She was going to school every day. She was at her after-school job, and she was being trafficked at night. So the movement is not a requisite. Those methods, pretty simple to understand them. Force is obvious: rapes, beatings, some sort of confinement or constraint, or getting the person addicted to drugs, or keeping them addicted as a means of control. Because if you're addicted, you can't leave. You can't be away from that drug for too long, or you get extremely ill. Fraud would be those false promises. Come to the United States and get a wonderful job, a new life, or, I can give you anything your mom can't give you, so come stay with me for a while. Those are the things that lure people in, and they get trapped in it. They can't get out. This picture is of a Zambian boys' choir. And there was a minister in the 90s, went over to Zambia, some of you may know the story, and recruited these young men to come to the States. They came to Texas. Promises to their families: we're going to earn good money to send back to the village so you can build better schools. And these young men will get to get a wonderful U.S. education. Well, none of that happened. They came. They did do a lot of concerts. They did sometimes 3 and 4 a day. They never saw the money. The minister was pocketing it. The only way they got revealed was at one of the concerts, the older boys had finally gotten enough courage to speak out. Because they weren't supposed to talk to the audience. They were supposed to just go do the concert and leave. Well, at one of them, they spoke out, and law enforcement was called in, and the boys were rescued. The youngest, Given Kachepa, was 11 at the time that this happened. And he was adopted by an American family, allowed to complete his education, is now a dentist. He graduated from Baylor University with his dental degree. So it's a good outcome for him, but a very long time of being trafficked as a child and couldn't go back to even see his family for all that time. So that's fraud. Any of those false premises. Coercion, these are the psychological games and the threats. If you don't do what I say, something very bad will happen to you or to someone that you love, which is sometimes even bigger than if it's going to hurt me. If you're going to hurt my family, I'm much more concerned. So any of those kinds of schemes to get the person to do what the trafficker wants, abusing the legal system or any of that. In the picture here, you may have seen it downstairs, Teresa's book. She has become a major figure in our response to trafficking in the Cleveland area because we've gotten to know her so well. She was trafficked at age 15 in the 80s, so it's been a while. And it's still a journey of healing because she was trafficked by a classmate. So, and it went on for 2 years. She was raped hundreds of times by men that she did not know. And the only way she got out of it was they left her abandoned at a motel with nothing. Not even the phone in the room. It had been ripped out of the wall. So all she had was her soaking wet pajamas and this fear of what would happen to her and how she would ever get out of it. But she eventually did, and we're so grateful that she is now part of the staff at U.S. Catholic Sisters Against Human Trafficking. But that's coercion. You get trapped in it so you can't say what's going on. They threatened to kill her little brothers. Well, she wasn't going to talk. She was going to earn the pictures back that they took of the rape that they had done of her. That's her goal, get those pictures. But it took 2 years even to get out of it. And then suffered years with the trauma, not knowing who to talk to because nobody understood it. They couldn't get it. And finally, one of the first times she ever spoke was before the Ohio Supreme Court, helping us to get a law in the state against human trafficking. And so we owe her a lot in the state, but also nationally as well. But that's coercion. So some groups and individuals tend to be more at risk. Obviously, children would be at risk because they don't always know enough to make good decisions. But women and men who are desperate for work can make decisions that could get them in some kind of trouble. The homeless, those who run away from home because maybe something's pretty bad at home. But then, how do you survive on the streets? You know, the money runs out after a couple days. Then what do you do? And we know from talking to kids on the streets, one of the agencies in Cleveland does that, the traffickers approach them within about 48 hours. They're likely to be approached by a trafficker, offering them a place to stay, a meal, even a job. And then, you got to pay me back. You got to let me sell you to my friends. It happens so easily. Immigrants, those who are disabled, the LGBTQ community, often at risk because they're vulnerable. So other factors do contribute to vulnerability. Poverty can be one, although you don't have to be poor. Teresa was not poor, but she was trafficked. We've found that illiteracy can be, especially in labor trafficking, a vulnerability because persons may sign documents, contracts, but they can't read the language or speak the language. And they sign it, they don't know what they just signed, that now they're committed. Our culture doesn't do us any favors. It's become pretty sexualized and we don't even notice how things get advertised often. We know that pornography can be a driver here because of the addiction that some people have and they see people as objects. So And who's in those films? How did they get in those films? We've tended to glamorize the pimp in our culture. And I'm grateful this year I have not seen any pimp costumes, but that I used to. And that's degrading. It's really just disgusting and degrading. Housing insecurity. People who don't have a place to be become vulnerable. We've grown to know that systemic racism is a big factor. Our black and brown sisters and brothers many times are more vulnerable because of societal attitudes about how they are and our biases about, well, they're more mature. They understand these things. They can deal with them better. Their children know they can't, and it shouldn't be happening. We've come to learn that social media is a huge, huge factor. What used to happen on the streets happens on social media. Most of it now, the recruitment, the luring in, the exchange of photos, all of that. And parents get freaked out, of course, because the kids aren't afraid of any app on a phone or anywhere else. They're not afraid to try it, and they think who they're talking to is a friend. And parents don't always know what their kids are doing online. Makes it a really nerve-wracking thing. And we found that the pandemic heightened all of this. Because of the isolation that happened, people spent more time online. So it all wraps together. There are lots of vulnerabilities and lots of reasons why someone could be more likely to become trafficked. Now, why don't they run away? We get this question. Why don't they just leave? If it's so bad, why don't they just leave? Well, they can't. That's, I think, the biggest reason is fear, in capital letters. Fear of the trafficker because of the threats. Fear that they'll be seen as the criminal, which in sex trafficking, they likely could be labeled as the prostitute. They might not see themselves as a victim at all. What do you mean he's a criminal? He's my boyfriend. He loves me. Yeah, he beats me now and then, but he loves me. He gives me what I need. Maybe they blame themselves for getting into the situation. If only I had obeyed my mom, this wouldn't happen. It's my fault. Or they have a very low sense of their own esteem, their worth. Who would ever believe me if I told them this? It must be only happening to me. So who does this? Who are the traffickers? What do they look like? Well, we have that image in our head, perhaps, of the pimp. And when I ask kids, that's what they describe because that's what they've seen in posters and music and videos and all that. But what about the temp agency manager running agencies in 14 states, not paying his workers, keeping their documents from them? Or the kid on the college campus who has a stable full of girls on the side that he's using all that money to pay off his student loans. This one bothers me. Medical professionals as the traffickers. There's a case in Wisconsin. It's pretty old now, but I'm hoping this physician couple is still in prison where they belong. They trafficked a Filipino woman in their home for 19 years. She did all the child care, all the work in the home, and they locked her in the basement for 19 years. That's a long time. So they deserve to be in federal prison, but what a waste of career. Construction sites, construction workers, it can happen easily. What about a young female as a trafficker? This is becoming probably more common because the young girl gets her friends involved because she'll get a better deal from the trafficker. And so we're seeing more of that. On the other end of the age spectrum, grandparents as traffickers. There's a bakery in Connecticut. It's called Rocco's Italian Bakery. Everybody loved the place. But they came to find out that the couple was trafficking an Ecuadorian family to do all the work in that bakery. They made them live on the premises. They didn't pay them for their work. They kept their documents from them. And we know that there have been trusted members of the clergy who are traffickers, like that minister, but we've had members of other religious denominations as well, including Catholic priests. So it's pretty horrific. It could be anybody, really. You can't tell by looking. You have to look way beneath the surface. So what about the buyers? They too could be anybody. And often we've learned that there are trusted members of society, prominent members of the community, law enforcement officers, judges, doctors, lawyers, teachers. You just don't know by looking. And when it comes to labor trafficking, it could be any of us because of what we're purchasing, and we don't think about the effects of our actions. So we'll talk more about that a little bit later. So it's a crime, right? And there are laws against it. And you've heard about the Trafficking Victims Protection Act. It was passed in 2000. It's still a very good law. It gets reauthorized every few years. They cover prevention, so they do education and awareness. They do a segment on protection. So they'll offer a visa. They'll offer benefits and services. I think when they wrote the law, they really thought this was happening to foreign-born individuals, not thinking it happened to U.S. citizens. I can tell you for sure in the Cleveland area, it's been predominantly U.S. citizens. And when you think of the volume of this, the cost of benefits and services is getting exponentially high. Of course it would. The other P would be prosecution. So they gave law enforcement some tough tools to use against the criminals and efforts to keep them in rein. And law enforcement was also discovering along the way. They added this fourth P a bit later, and they call it partnerships. They realized we can't do this alone. It takes many more disciplines to help such a complex issue get any semblance of resolution or care for those who are victimized by it. So obviously the needs of trafficked persons run the gamut. They need everything. They need basic safety and housing. They'll need perhaps food and clothing if their clothes were taken as evidence. They don't have anything. They're likely to need health care and also mental health care and substance abuse care, because those are so intertwined. They may need legal services. If they're foreign-born, they may need translation help and immigration help, education, employment. So it runs the gamut. It takes many, many of us working together to meet all these needs. So services are what are needed. And that can be a challenge in any community because we never seem to have quite enough of any of those. So what can you do? I'm going to approach first what you do as a healthcare provider, and then we'll get to the more general things as a citizen. So what do you do as a healthcare provider? You pay attention first, and you check your own attitude about your own biases. Many of us in healthcare know which kinds of patients will push our buttons. There's certain kinds of patients that you think, oh no, here comes the frequent flyer again. Here comes the addict again who was just here last week and is back again. And those kinds of things, those biases can get in our way. The other thing that would be probably good to do, we just heard about trauma a bit, but think of the traumas in your own life. Maybe they haven't been huge traumas, but they've affected you, and you may remember how you felt at the time. Now, my example is I'm pretty afraid of dogs, and I've been afraid of dogs since I was about 1.5 years old because I was knocked down by a big dog. And so it's in my brain. If I see a dog, it's right there. I'm afraid, and I can't stop that. I've learned to deal with it, but if I had to feel that way all the time, I couldn't function. I'm sure I couldn't. So if someone is feeling that kind of trauma all the time, are you going to get a straight answer out of them? Are they going to be able to tell you what really happened to them? Are they even going to trust you to tell you? it's traumatic and it's hard to deal with trauma, especially if it's been unresolved. So consider what that person has endured already and have high regard for what they've been able to survive under the circumstances. Consciously engage with your patient. They're the one right before you, and not the computer. This is really, really hard for health professionals because documentation is so important, and it is. And sometimes the computer is set so your back will be toward the patient. You can't get a straight answer, really, if you're not looking at the patient, because you can say, "Are you safe at home?" And they'll say yes, but their behavior is saying, I'm not. And you can read that if you look at them. So that's a challenge, and it's a challenge to health systems to set things up so it can be different. So your nonverbal messages will convey real caring or not. Your nonverbals can be even more important than what you're saying out loud. So those are the first things. Then how would I recognize if someone is really being trafficked? So when you do a standard assessment, look beneath the surface. What are you seeing and hearing and sensing? And pay attention to the things that just don't ring true. They don't add up. Something's not right. That injury, you couldn't have gotten it tripping over the chair. Something else was going on. Those bruises are not consistent with that. What's really going on? Pay attention to those things. There are indicators that we call red flags. Some of them are physical and some of them are control. So the physical ones may be pretty obvious. You know, you might see broken bones or unhealed bones or things that have healed improperly, injuries to the face or teeth, poor hygiene, evidence of substance disorder, tattoos that may be brands. Traffickers, in some instances, like to brand what they consider to be their property, like you would brand cattle. It's pretty gross. And the tattoos are usually pretty gross, too. The word daddy, someone else's name, dollar signs, barcodes, things that just make you cringe almost. So how you address that is to be curious about the barcode. What does it mean? You may get an answer, or you may not. The person may not be ready to disclose any of that, but be curious about it. Someone who makes no eye contact, they're really nervous in front of you, they seem to be depressed, they're pretty silent. Maybe they're malnourished, they're dehydrated, or they have some unusual occupational injury or illness, and it just doesn't quite match with what they've told you they came in for. Pay attention to those things. Now, the control indicators are just as important. They're accompanied, perhaps, by a controlling person who doesn't let them talk, doesn't let them answer the questions, or they're going to correct the answer that was given, and the patient seems pretty fearful or nervous around them, or may not even look at them or look at you. Maybe they're not in the room, but the patient is getting texts or frequent phone calls during the exam and during the treatment. What's that about? So it can be either way, they're in the room or not. And the person is hypervigilant, they're subordinate in their demeanor. It can be a range of responses, but pay attention to those things. There's some control being exerted upon them so that they're too afraid to give you what's the right answer. So what do you do? How do you handle this? Certainly you follow the abuse protocols that are present in most of our healthcare facilities anyway. We know what we do in terms of abuse or potential abuse. And separate the patient from the controlling person. And that would include family members, because sometimes it's the family who's doing the trafficking. Now, in healthcare, we're pretty fortunate to have some creative means of doing that. We need an x-ray. You can't come to x-ray. So just wait here, wait down the hall, we'll call you when we're done. Or we need a urine specimen. We don't all fit in the bathroom, so you wait here. So we can be creative about that, and that's a good thing. You want to provide a safe and comfortable and private space for the person and attend, of course, to their medical needs and the treatment. So building rapport as you go really helps, and assuring the person of confidentiality up to the point that you can. In some cases, like for children, this is a child abuse issue. It's reportable. You have to report. So you have to be honest about that as well. And then learning, as we heard earlier, how to interact in a trauma-informed manner. The kinds of questions to ask, but probably even more important, how to ask those questions. Because how you ask them conveys an entirely different feel than even the questions themselves. So you may have heard of, and I thought there would be copies of, what is called the PAIR tool. Anybody heard of the PAIR tool? This is a tool that has been produced by Dignity Health and Common Spirit Health. They're now together. I think it's all Common Spirit Health. And it was really devised by a survivor and others, but her name is Holly Gibbs, and you may have heard of her. So it's basic, and it's some of the things that we've addressed already. Providing that privacy is really important, so the person feels comfortable. They're not out in public exposing everything that's going on. Educating the patient to the best that you can. I ask these questions of all my patients because I want to be sure they're safe, and I want to be sure that you know how to get help if you ever need it. Ask the questions, and ask them in a manner that is non-threatening, and then respecting the response that you get, respecting that maybe the person doesn't want to respond or isn't ready to reveal, is too frightened to reveal, and then respond with some appropriate response. So that tool is helpful. I'll be sure that you get it. They assured me there would be copies, so they must be somewhere here. We'll get them for you. They're also available online. You can find it. So what are some of those questions? The other thing about the questions is you don't pull out a checklist and just ask the questions. No, you integrate it into the process that you're doing anyway. It's part of how you build rapport, and you ask the questions that are pertinent to what you're seeing. You don't need to use all of them. You need the ones that fit. If your person is foreign-born and does not speak or understand English, you need to use a certified interpreter, not the family member, not the person who came, because that may be the trafficker. So you're not going to get the appropriate responses. And a certified interpreter needs to understand this issue too, so that they ask the questions in a manner that would exhibit an appropriate response. So some possible questions, if you're expecting that it's been happening. Have you been forced to have sex or do work against your will? Have to have multiple partners? Do you need to have a quota? Have you ever exchanged sex for food or shelter or money or drugs? Some more questions. Do you have to live where you work? Do you need permission to go to the bathroom or to eat meals? Someone holding your documents for you? How come you don't have your documents yourself? Have you been threatened in any way, or has your family been threatened? Have you suffered physical abuse from your employer, so you're afraid to leave the job because something else bad could happen? Were you lied to about the kind of work that you would be doing, which is many times the case? And have you been threatened with deportation or jail if you tried to leave? So these are some possible questions, and you ask the ones that fit. You don't ask all of them necessarily. So what if you get a yes, and this is a child, and you get a response of yes? As I mentioned earlier, you have to follow the child abuse protocols. This is a reportable crime. And even if the trafficker might be a parent or a guardian, or the suspected trafficker would be, and that can get a little tricky, how you do it. You certainly, if you have security staff available, you want them to know what you're dealing with. Now, the whole staff doesn't need to know all at once, and you make a big scene about it, but somebody has to know. And you might want to check to see if this child is on the missing persons report. Many, many cities and law enforcement departments have a listing of current missing kids. And one of our facilities in Cleveland, Rainbow Babies and Children's, started checking that list when they had a child that they suspected was being abused in some manner. They found a lot of missing kids because this was happening. Not all of them were trafficked, but they found missing kids because they were looking for them. The local police detective who might be in charge of the case, the Regional Human Trafficking Task Force, if you have one, the Department of Children and Family Services. So obviously that means you have to have built some relationships with all these groups ahead of time. And when you call, they know that you know what you're looking at and why you need help. So the relationship building is underneath all this. You have to do that work to make it work for the whole person who's involved in this. Now, you don't have to give out, and you shouldn't give out, any medical information. But demographic information is not medical. Name, address, guardian name, phone number, that's not medical, that's demographic. That's allowable. You're not violating HIPAA when you give out that information. And the police will then investigate it. So what if this person is over the age of 18 and they say yes? They have a right not to talk to law enforcement. Much as we want them to do it, they might not be ready, and so they can't. But you need their consent. And if they say yes, help them do it. Help them call 911 or the task force or the local police department so that they can get the support and help they need. Now, our law enforcement folks are very well trained now to know how to interact in a trauma-informed manner as opposed to just come in and do what you might see on Law and Order. They don't do it that way. They may come in and say, you know, I know you've had a rough time and I want to talk to you, but now's not the time. I want to come see you later because you need to get some rest. You need to care for yourself, get some sleep before we talk about this, unless you're ready now. But I want you to have that option to get the rest. And that's been more effective. The law enforcement isn't seen so much as a interrogator and a person to be afraid of because these guys have learned, and women, but a lot of the time it's guys who have become very sensitized and do a very good job. So if the person says, I'm not ready, I just can't do that right now, provide the assurance that they can always come back when they are ready. So that creation of rapport becomes very important along the way, so they've learned, you're a safe person, I could come back here and get the care that I need. And then verbally name some local agencies where they could get help, including the health facility, but maybe it's the Rape Crisis Center, maybe it's Department of Children and Family Services, maybe it's the caseworker they already have, whoever it might be. Maybe there's a support group for women who have been trafficked. Whatever the case might be, maybe there's a housing agency that does do shelter for those who have been trafficked. Whatever is available in your region becomes really important. And then provide the phone numbers in writing if that's a safe thing to do. It's not always safe because if the trafficker finds that kind of information on the person, they may get beaten again. So they have to tell you if it's safe for them to have that or not. But sometimes they can remember at least some of the information and know they can come back there. You might want to make a follow-up appointment so that you have them coming back to see someone in the organization that they know that you want to check on them. So getting the victims the help they need, 911, of course, if they're in immediate harm, you have to call 911. But the local police and human trafficking task force, the local rape crisis center, other care providers, and nationally, and I think it was alluded to last evening, that there is a national human trafficking hotline, and you're probably very familiar with that. When we talk to kids, we ask them to put this in their phone so that they know that there's always someone they can call to be safe. And it's written in a strange manner because then they can remember it. 888-37-37-888. We had them make posters and cheers and ways that they could remember that number. Or the person may want to text the word help to be free at 233-733. It's a way to interact with the national hotline. Now, that's answered 24/7 in Washington, D.C. It's not available in your own place. I'm in Cleveland. Washington is pretty far away. If we need immediate help, the task force needs to know what's available in your region for the person to get the kind of help. So they have our agencies listed, and they can help get the person the right contact. If you call, anybody can call that number. You can call just for information. You don't have to give your name. What they will do is assume when you call that you could be the victim. And so they'll ask two questions. The first one is, are you in a safe place? Because they don't want to put you in danger or the person in danger because they're talking on the phone and the trafficker could overhear that. The second question is, where are you calling from? Because they want to use the local resources, and that's why they collect that information and have it available to them. So it's a good, you may want to try it and see what response you get. There have been some issues in certain areas that it's been way too far away. I called from Youngstown, Ohio a few years ago just to see. There was a group of us talking, so we called, and they were going to refer us to Pittsburgh or Akron, both of which are like an hour away. Way too far if you need immediate help. It's different now. Youngstown has stepped up to the plate. They have things available. Okay, we're glad for that. So here are some resources, many you've probably heard about. Heal Trafficking has an excellent website with all kinds of professional documents now, research articles. You'll probably find from the speakers that we've had articles written by them and the research that they've done. The group is made up of physicians, nurses, social workers, and others involved in the healing professions working on the issue nationally but also globally. So it's a lot of research, and it's very helpful now. 2014, we didn't have that kind of information. I mentioned the PAIR tool. That's at commonspirit.org. Polaris Project is really reliable. Probably many of you know that already. And they've done some documents that are reports, and one of them is called A Roadmap for Systems and Industries to Prevent and Disrupt Human Trafficking, and it includes healthcare. So it's a good document to refer to learn more. And then, of course, sistersagainsttrafficking.org as well. So as a citizen, what do? You pay attention when you're out. What are you seeing? Who's with whom? How are they acting? Do they seem not to match? Sometimes you just notice and you get a strange feeling. Something's not right here. That child doesn't seem to fit with that other person. Pay attention to your feelings and your gut reactions, because you're usually right. Advocate for better laws and an enforcement of the laws that we have. Note the connections between human trafficking and the other social issues that some of them have been mentioned, like migration has been mentioned, racism has been mentioned, poverty, climate change, which is causing people to be forced into migrating. So these are all connected. We can't look at one without another. If you do see something, know whom to call. Don't try to intervene on your own. It's just not safe to do. So that's why those relationships are so important. Knowing who's in your area, who you can count on, they know you, they know to pay attention when you call because you know what you're doing. We need also to be aware of how human trafficking is touching every one of us every day. Where's our food coming from? Who's growing it, harvesting it, getting it to the table for us? Is it slave labor somewhere in our country or another country? And what about that chocolate? We have fair trade chocolate here, I'm glad for it. But other chocolate, I hate to think of the little kid in the Ivory Coast who's having to harvest the cocoa beans so I can have a candy bar. I lose my taste for it at that point. Who's giving us services in hotels or nail salons? Who's making our clothing? Is it being made in sweatshops here or abroad? Hard to find clothing that is made fairly traded, very hard. Services in hotels, other places that we frequent. So we're touched by human trafficking all the time, and it's a challenge to know how to respond. So here's a challenge. Maybe you've heard of slaveryfootprint.org. If you have, it's probably already made an impact on your life because you don't forget it. If you haven't done it, I challenge you to do it. And it's basically a little survey on there. It's fun to do because they keep you almost like entertained with pictures. They want to know what kind of a house do you live in, kind of a car you drive, what's in your closet, your cupboards, your refrigerator, electronics in your home, sporting goods in your home, those kinds of questions. After you answer them all, you get a number. That number is how many slaves work for you to maintain your current lifestyle. I guarantee you it's shocking, and it can be life-changing if you allow it to be. When I did it, I got the number 18, and I was horrified. Because I thought I lived pretty simply. Well, now I'm challenged to live much more simply. And there are ways to do that. And the website goes on to tell you some ways that you might reduce your number. We can't change it overnight. We can't change it all at once. But we can be cognizant, and we can make different decisions once we know. So I challenge you to do it and see what happens. Questions, comments? Yes?
Just one, I used to be able to find an actual sheet or a bunch of sheets that had fair trade products,
Yes.
and I cannot find it anymore. Does anybody have a really good site that lists? I honest to goodness used to print and keep it in my car, you know what I mean, for like
Yeah.
certain places and stuff, but I can't find it anymore. Do you?
There are, and I can't remember the name of it, but I think Katie mentioned it today, and if we scan this little thing, we might be able to.
There was a few on there, because I did look at that.
Yeah.
The one I used to have was this really nice list.
There used to be a nice little book too.
Yes.
So,
I can't find
so maybe we
something
can
that has that.
research that and find it,
Yeah,
because it is helpful.
it is.
Mm-hmm.
Let us ask Katie if that, where that
Okay,
was
Yeah.
gonna be.
because
But
that's-
I'm also thinking ICCR, don't they have a ICCR, they might have a.
Oh, yeah,
They work really hard to educate organizations that are not practicing fair trade, so they.
What is it?
ICCR.
Yeah,
I can send you
ICCR.
some more
Mhm.
information on
I
that.
would really appreciate, anybody has it, I'm just kind of looking for that to.
Sure.
So we'll ask Katie for that list,
Okay.
and then the other thing, Sister Ann, if we email the Pear Tool page to Teresa, we can get copies printed here, and if you don't mind, I'll take a picture of the people in this room, and we can hand it out to them.
Yeah, I emailed it to her earlier, but it may have gotten lost in the
I know,
shuffle.
I think so, I just checked with her.
Yeah.
Yep, so we can get that.
Yeah, we'll get it for you though.
Show them through.
Yeah. It's pretty, it just helps you fit into a context of how do you do this. The other thing you need to do is make sure that you're dealing with your whole team of people that you work with. So you know ahead of time, how are you going to respond? As I was mentioning before, it took us a while to get so that our facilities knew how to do this without causing a big uproar in the department, and knowing how they're going to handle cases like this before it happens. And so establishing that ahead of time is really useful. And you need lots of players coming together to make that happen. Yes.
Some years ago, I got a little fold-out thing for staff in the ER,
Mm-hmm.
and it fit into their name badge holder, and I cannot find that anymore. And it was not 20-pound paper, but it was an accordion pleated
Right.
thing.
Mhm.
And it said what to look for, the next panel, questions to ask, the next one, what to do, who to contact.
Yes.
So does anybody know the resource for that? I got some free copies, but they're long gone.
I think I remember and I'm trying to think of the system that did it,
I do remember that too.
but I think, yes, I can probably find it somewhere in my computer, which I have
Yeah.
here, so.
I looked at Catholic Health Association, I don't know
Yeah.
if it was there. I can't find it again. So-
Okay, we'll try to find that.
You
as
can
well.
search it out, this whole thing, because I think when they started all those protocols, I remember 2014 or something, we presented, I was a member of the group of with Arkansas, like Wichita, and we
Yes.
presented all the protocol because the lady, the one who developed it in hospital, was it's part of her thesis. So when she presented that whole thing, we pierced it, and then CHA kind of come when we had this presentation at CHA, they come to really look at it and they can modify it the way what fits their and we have done that too because we are part of Ascension. And they decided after that all the Ascension hospital are being trained for that whole thing with the protocol, but they can adjust it to where we are. It's a protocol. It's a three-folded thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Heal Trafficking also has protocols of like a toolkit.
Yeah.
For how do you do this? And it's really very helpful. They've just revised it,
Yeah.
and I recommended to them that they include chaplains as part of the team, because
And we
people
have,
may disclose to chaplains.
and we have the trifold brochure. I'm trying to think if I brought any with me because I'm from Ascension. I just need to look in my suitcase and see if I brought any. If I did, I'll bring them down later today.
Yeah.
Because I don't know if it's the generic one or our healthcare specific one, but we do use those trifold brochures.
Yeah.
So I'll see if I have any. If I do, I'll bring them out.
You should have one.
I just don't know if I passed them. They're
Yeah.
probably in my computer bag from something else we did last week, but I'll check and see what we do have, and if not, I can bring some business cards and we can send you some.
Yeah. The other thing to realize is that this does take time to evolve and to be accepted in a system, so you can't do it overnight and you can't stop being persistent about it.
And
Just keep that.
the other thing too in healthcare thing is a continual education. Not
Mhm.
only the people because at one time they just do with the ER and then the opening for all the
Right.
associate.
Mhm.
So like, this is an educational program and things those are interested and it is widened. So
Yeah.
at one time we just decided, I remember we just decided for ER and the nursing. And then we
That's good,
expand that.
everybody.
And what the more people who work in healthcare know about it, the
Right.
more it's helpful.
Right, some have made it into their competencies on an annual basis. Yes.
Yep.
Can I comment on those though, because I have to take those, and you zip through those, and some people don't even look at the material, they just go right to the test, and they do that. So anytime we can do face-to-face trainings with
Yes.
individuals, because those competency ones, you have to get through so many in a certain amount of time, and I guarantee most people just go, oh, click, test, and you can take it how many times, and then you can, you know the answers, and you just do that, and you don't even look at the material.
Yeah, so they have to change. They can't be the same every year.
But I'm just saying,
Yeah.
you still,
Yeah.
It's
And,
just keep
yeah.
changing.
And some are doing simulations, which helps people learn in a different way. Some people will learn better by doing than just by listening or reading. So there are lots of ways. The other thing that we've been working on is getting this situated in the curricula of the helping professions. And colleges and universities who are preparing people need to have this as part of the curriculum. They can put it in however they need to, but these are the standard things that need to be included. And we've had some success with that. And everybody will put it where it belongs from their university's perspective, but it's working.
When you said simulation, that triggered something in my mind. Some years ago, we did an immigration simulation
Mhm.
with like 100 people. and did it in our town for several locations. Is there a human trafficking simulation developed?
I don't know of one for sure, but I think Lakeland Community College up in the east side of Cleveland has a simulation. I've been dying to see it,
Yeah.
but COVID hit, so I couldn't go there
Sure.
to see it.
Yeah.
The other place, I think it's Indiana Wesleyan had a simulation. I'm not positive if all these things are still in existence, but
What's the name of that school?
Indiana Wesleyan University. So people are getting creative with it, which is good because people learn different ways. You might as well tap into different learning styles
Which
too.
one was the other one you said, Indiana, Wesleyan, and which one?
Lakeland Community College.
Lakeland,
And I
that's-
still want to check that one out, so I have to find a free day and go visit.
And that's in Lakeland?
Yeah.
What was the first one you said?
Indiana Wesleyan and Lakeland Community College. So we've had some success with Ursuline, Notre Dame College in Cleveland, Cleveland State, Kent State,
Success in what way?
getting it into the curriculum.
Oh, I see.
So they've-
Okay.
They found a way to include it. And they all do it a little differently, but there are ways to do it that will fit with their programs.
And so has Texas. Texas
Okay,
just passed
yes.
a law, a legislation, so that all nursing students had to have it when they were in nursing, so.
Yes.
They have a curriculum that they developed in Texas to make sure every nursing student has it. It's only
Good.
been about a year since they passed that law, but
So there are curricula developed. We don't have to recreate the wheel.
Texas.
We can learn from each other how it might work.
If anybody ever wants a entire class on human trafficking for a college, you just have to let me know and I will give you what I have.
It depends on the area, because I remember, that was kind of people, the monitor all I think in Wichita, Kansas, with attention, we have different schools that
Mhm.
they do a presentation, and then we have a lot of them all over, even with Kansas University and all of those things.
Yeah.
In some other area, they have just to look, they have and invite people from the healthcare institute, because they have equipment and they have things already what to share, because they get invited, a couple of them, I got the report that they get invited to different schools. And also, there are students who are very, very interested in all knowing about
Mhm.
this whole thing. So a lot of times they have programs that they will tell them, okay, this group from the hospital will be doing this presentation.
Yeah.
It's available if they
Mhm.
kind of know who to contact.
Other questions or comments? Well, you can always, I didn't put my email up there, but it's avictory@humilityofmary.org. And I think I might have some cards if you need.
Sister, thank you for your presentation.
Oh, you're welcome.
A lot of times people forget how valuable is education, regardless which group you are belong, and they will invite the police, you see.
Oh,
But
yeah.
I was very much involved with our thing in Wichita.
Mhm.
We have a program for the police, the district authority, everybody is involved in the legal system.
Mhm.
And then the school, teachers and things like that, we have different programs that we do a presentation,
Mhm.
and it's well attended,
Yeah,
because people want to know.
yeah. A lot of people want to know, and there are some that resist it, but because they don't want to believe it happens in their neighborhood, so. But thank you, I'm delighted to be with you and getting to share this information
Thank you for your
today.
sharing.
Not as scholarly, but you know, it's the down-to-earth practical stuff, which
And then we'll
sometimes you
follow
need.
up on the couple of items that people are looking for.
Sure.
okay?
And we'll get the pear tool for you.
We're on it.
Okay, good. Excellent. Well, thank you very much.
Thank